Cold open, June 18, 1982. A postal worker walking across Blackfriars Bridge in London looks down. Hanging from the scaffolding beneath the bridge, suspended between the stone and the black water, is a body. The man is wearing a grey suit. His pockets are filled with bricks. His shoes are still on. A rope is tied around his neck. He has been dead for hours. The man's name is Roberto Calvi. He was 62 years old. He was the chairman of Banco Ambrosiano, one of Italy's largest private banks. He had just fled Italy on a false passport. He had just been convicted of currency violations. He was due back in court in weeks, and he was known in certain circles by a name that should have protected him. They called him God's banker. It did not protect him. Nothing would ever be the same for the Vatican, for the Italian mob, for the people who trusted their life savings to the institutions Roberto Calvi served, and the men who put him there, under that bridge, in that cold water, would walk free, every single one of them. This is the story of how one man stood at the intersection of faith, organized crime, and $1 billion fraud, and how the people who used him made sure he could never talk. Setup. Roberto Calvi was born in Milan in 1920. He was not a flashy man. He was not charismatic in the way you might expect from someone who would one day control billions of dollars. He was quiet, meticulous. He wore conservative suits and kept his hair neatly combed. He looked like the kind of man who balanced his personal checkbook to the penny. That was the point. He joined Banco Ambrosiano in 1947 as a junior clerk. The bank had been founded in 1896 in Milan and was considered deeply Catholic. It was sometimes called the priest's bank. For decades, it was a quiet institution serving the Italian faithful. Calvi climbed slowly, methodically. By 1971, he was general manager. By 1975, he was chairman. He was now one of the most powerful bankers in Italy. But power like that does not exist in a vacuum. Not in Italy, not in 1975. To become truly powerful, Roberto Calvi needed relationships, and the relationships he built would eventually consume him entirely. The first relationship was with Licio Gelli. Gelli was the Grand Master of a secret Masonic lodge called Propaganda Due, P2. The lodge was not a harmless fraternal organization. It was a shadow network of power. Its membership list, discovered by accident during a police raid in 1981, included politicians, military generals, intelligence officers, judges, and journalists. Nearly 1,000 names, all of them operating in secret, all of them owing each other favors. Calvi joined P2. The second relationship was with Archbishop Paul Marcinkus. Marcinkus was an American-born prelate from Cicero, Illinois, a city with its own complicated history. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had served as a bodyguard to Pope Paul VI before becoming the head of the Istituto per le Opere di Religione, the Institute for Religious Works. The Vatican Bank. Marcinkus ran the IOR with almost no oversight. The Vatican was not a signatory to international banking regulations. It could move money across borders without the scrutiny applied to ordinary banks. It was, in the language of financial crime, a perfect vehicle. Calvi saw that immediately. The third relationship was the one that sealed his fate, the Sicilian Mafia. Specifically, Calvi connected with figures tied to the Sicilian mob through a Sicilian banker named Michele Sindona, a man who had his own catastrophic story, his own trail of ruin, his own list of enemies. Sindona introduced Calvi to networks of offshore shell companies, to channels of money that could disappear and reappear clean on the other side of the world. By the late 1970s, Roberto Calvi was not just a banker. He was a mechanism, a human laundering machine standing between the Vatican, the Italian underworld, and billions of dollars that needed to move without leaving fingerprints. The turn. The machine worked. For a while. The structure Calvi built was elegant in the way that all great frauds are elegant before they collapse. At its core was a network of shell companies, dozens of them, registered in Luxembourg, Panama, the Bahamas, and Nicaragua. They had names that sounded legitimate. They had letterheads. They had bank accounts. What they did not have was real business. Through these shells, Calvi would have Banco Ambrosiano issue loans. The loans would go to the shell companies. The shell companies would funnel the money to the Vatican Bank, to Licio Gelli and P2 members, to mafia-connected interests in South America. The Vatican Bank in turn held shares in Banco Ambrosiano, lending the whole operation an aura of institutional legitimacy. The IOR's involvement was the key, because when regulators asked questions about these mysterious loans, Banco Ambrosiano could point to the Vatican Bank as a guarantor. And who investigates the Vatican? Nobody. That was the answer. But cracks appeared. They always do. In 1978, the Bank of Italy began examining Banco Ambrosiano. The examiners noticed something wrong. Vast sums of money were moving to overseas subsidiaries that appeared to have no real assets. The loans were enormous, and they were unsecured. By 1981, the situation was catastrophic. Banco Ambrosiano's overseas subsidiaries, shell entities in Panama and elsewhere, owed approximately $1.3 billion. Borrowed from Ambrosiano itself, backed by nothing. The money had gone everywhere. To Licio Gelli, to P2, to Nicaraguan Contras according to some investigators, to political parties, to mafia coffers that needed legitimate cover. $1 billion, scattered like ash. In May 1981, Italian police raided Gelli's villa and found the P2 membership list. Nearly 1,000 names. The scandal exploded across Italy. The government fell. Gelli fled the country. And Roberto Calvi, whose name was not on that list, but whose fingerprints were on everything connected to it, suddenly found himself completely exposed. In the same month, Calvi was arrested. He was charged with violating Italian currency regulations, moving money illegally out of the country. The trial was swift. In July 1981, he was convicted and sentenced to 4 years in prison and fined 13.7 billion lira. He appealed. He was allowed to remain free pending the appeal. He returned to his desk at Banco Ambrosiano. This was the moment that should have been his ending. But it wasn't. It was something worse, because now Calvi was scared, and scared men become desperate, and desperate men make moves that get them killed. He began writing letters to Pope John Paul II personally. He warned that the Vatican's involvement in Ambrosiano's collapse could bring down the church. He pleaded for intervention. He begged for protection from people he could not name in writing. The letters were not answered. By early 1982, the Bank of Italy had presented its findings to the Ambrosiano board. The bank had a hole in it the size of a country, $1.3 billion. Gone. The board panicked. The Italian government was watching. International creditors were asking questions that could not be answered. In June 1982, the board voted to remove Calvi as chairman. He received the news and did something that, in retrospect, tells you everything. He ran. The collapse. June 10th, 1982. Roberto Calvi left Italy on a false passport in the name of Gian Roberto Calvini. He was accompanied by a man named Silvano Vittor, a small-time smuggler who had been hired as a kind of fixer. They moved quickly. Venice, Innsbruck, London. In London, Calvi checked into a rented apartment in Chelsea. He was nervous. He was making calls. He was waiting for something or someone to rescue him. Back in Milan, Banco Ambrosiano was in free fall. On June 17, 1982, Calvi's personal secretary, a woman named Graziella Corrocer, jumped from a fourth-floor window at Banco Ambrosiano headquarters. She left a note. in it, she cursed Calvi for what he had done to the bank. She died on impact. The same day, Italian authorities formally declared Banco Ambrosiano insolvent. $1.3 billion in unrecoverable loans, thousands of shareholders destroyed. The bank that had been called the Priest's Bank, built on faith, on Catholic identity, on the trust of ordinary Italian families, was declared dead. On the night of June 17th to 18, Roberto Calvi left his Chelsea apartment. He told Vito he was going to meet someone. He was never seen alive again. At dawn on June 18th, the postal worker crossed Blackfriars Bridge and looked down. The bricks in his pockets weighed approximately 12 pounds. The rope around his neck was consistent with hanging. His hands were not bound. His watch was still on his wrist. His wallet contained cash in multiple currencies. The initial inquest returned a verdict of suicide. Almost nobody believed it. The logistics alone made suicide nearly impossible. To get beneath Blackfriars Bridge, a person must climb down from the embankment or arrive by boat. The scaffolding was slick with river water. Calvi, at 62, was not athletic. He was wearing city clothes. There was no easy way he put those bricks in his own pockets and tied that rope and climbed into position. A second inquest in 1983 returned an open verdict. Suicide could not be proven. In 1991, his body was exhumed. Italian forensic experts concluded he had been murdered before being hung. The position of the bruising on his neck, the angle of the rope, the lack of defensive injuries, all of it pointed to someone else. But who? The suspects formed a list that read like a conspiracy theorist's nightmare. Except every single name on it was real, and every single connection was documented. The Vatican Bank, which had lost money it could not explain and needed Calvi silent. Licio Gelli and the remnants of P2, who feared what Calvi might say to investigators. The Sicilian Mafia, who had used Ambrosiano to launder hundreds of millions and could not afford a witness. In 2003, Italian prosecutors charged 5 people with Calvi's murder. Among them was Pippo Cailo, a senior Sicilian mafia figure. Also charged were members of a Roman criminal organization. The trial lasted years. In 2007, all 5 defendants were acquitted. Insufficient evidence. Roberto Calvi's daughter Clara sat in that courtroom. She had spent decades demanding answers. She had hired private investigators. She had given interviews. She had filed legal motions across 3 countries. She watched the acquittals and said very little. What was there to say? The aftermath. The Vatican Bank, the IOR, was forced to acknowledge some responsibility. In 1984, after years of negotiation, the Holy See agreed to pay $244 million to Ambrosiano's creditors. They called it a goodwill payment. They explicitly did not call it an admission of guilt. Archbishop Paul Marcinkus was never tried for any crime. He remained at the Vatican, protected by Vatican City's status as a sovereign state, immune to Italian judicial process. Italy issued arrest warrants for him in 1987. He never left Vatican territory to face them. The Italian courts eventually ruled they had no jurisdiction. He retired quietly to Sun City, Arizona in 1990. He died in 2006. Licio Gelli fled Italy after the P2 scandal and spent years moving between South America and Europe, evading extradition, serving time, escaping from prison, literally escaping in 1983 from a Swiss jail. He was eventually returned to Italy and convicted of multiple crimes, including fraud and obstruction of justice. He died in 2015 at age 96. Michel Sindona, Calvi's original mob-connected banker mentor, had already met his end. He was convicted of murder in Italy and sentenced to life in prison. In 1986, 2 days after sentencing, he drank coffee in his prison cell. The coffee was laced with cyanide. It was ruled a suicide. Almost nobody believed that either. Banco Ambrosiano's collapse left thousands of ordinary Italian shareholders with nothing. Families who had placed their savings in what they believed was a Catholic institution, a safe institution, a moral institution, discovered their money had been funneled into shell companies in Panama, into the pockets of secret lodge members, into the operations of the Sicilian mafia. Some of them never financially recovered. Roberto Calvi was buried in Milan. He was later reburied after the 1991 exhumation. His family maintained for decades that he was murdered and that powerful institutions covered it up. No one has ever been convicted of his death. As for the Vatican Bank itself, the IOR survived. It was reformed slowly over decades. New oversight was promised after each scandal. Transparency was pledged. In 2013, Pope Francis ordered an independent review of all IOR accounts. Hundreds of suspicious accounts were closed. The head of the Vatican Financial Information Authority resigned. Reform, it turns out, moves slowly when the institution doing the reforming answers to God and no one else. Closing reflection. Blackfriars. The name is not incidental.
The Blackfriars, the Dominicans, were historically the inquisitors of the Catholic Church. They were the ones sent to find the truth, to expose the lie, to drag the hidden thing into the light. There is something almost unbearably dark about the fact that Roberto Calvi, the man who served as the living connection between the Church's money and the world's most organized criminals, was found hanging beneath a bridge that bore their name. Whether someone chose that location deliberately, no one knows. Whether it was coincidence, no one will ever prove otherwise. But the image remains. A man who knew too much, hanging where the inquisitors were named, over black water with bricks in his pockets. The Vatican called it tragic. The Italian government called it complicated. The courts called it unresolved. Roberto Calvi's daughter calls it murder. The river does not call it anything. The river just keeps moving.